Am I on, Kit? All right, yeah. Hey, thanks everyone for coming back in here. Have an opportunity to speak with Pastor Dan a little bit further. I may be a little redundant in some of the comments I made this morning, but just kind of give a little bit more background on Pastor Dan. He's has over 25 years of experience in leading Christian Reformed churches. The past 6 years, more specifically, in the role of a specialized transitional minister. I gave you a little bit of info about a month or so ago when we had a congregational meeting in regards to what a TSM does. And we can kind of get into that with Dan. It's his job, so he knows it better than me. But again, this is a position that is endorsed by the denomination. So Dan is endorsed by the denomination as a specialized transitional minister. It's going to be kind of an open forum at the conclusion, or as we feel it's kind of wrapping up. We'll excuse Dan, and then I would just ask for you all to stay here for a couple more minutes or however long it takes, but just open up any questions that you may have for myself or council as a whole, that way we may be able to answer for you after Dan leaves. So that's kind of going to be the format. Since I have the mic, I thought I'd kind of kick it off with our first question, and I guess my question would be is because, Dan, you've had an opportunity you met with our search committee, you met with our council, and you met with our staff. So I guess my question would be is, after having those conversations, kind of where you see our second church as it stands today, and then possibly with that, what you would bring to, in what direction you would bring us in the months and years to come.
Well, good questions. First of all, by way of introduction, you said I had 25 years of experience. 35 years,
okay.
Which means, okay, experience is good, but I'm old. Some of you are older. It's all relative, but anyway. Where do I see this church? Well, being a newcomer, I begin to see through a glass darkly. It's like looking through the fog, and you sort of see some things. But I know that what I see is incomplete. You know, I have to learn. And Tyler and Ken filled me in on a bunch of stuff last week. So there's a continual process of learning. And part of the genius of doing STM work, part of the rationale for it is, I'm in residence. So I'm not necessarily an insider, but I'm not really a total outsider either. And I need to listen. That's a big part of the job, is to listen. Listen to your stories. Listen to the story of the church. And those stories are interesting, and they're important. Every church is different. Now, as I see the story of this church, you went through an Article 17 separation from a pastor. That's always tough. It's like a kick in the gut, you know, and it knocks the air out of you. But it seems like this church has put a lot of that behind you, and you're coming together, you're breathing again, you want to go ahead into a new future. And the classis requires that you have an STM. And maybe that feels a little frustrating, like, oh, we've been bad, now we have to have an STM to straighten us out. I don't really see the church that way. I think you've got a lot going for you. From what I've seen, you probably could call a pastor right now. I mean, there's a lot of process in that, and a part of an STM's job is to help a church through that process. When the council decides, when the church decides, yeah, we're ready to start doing that, that's part of the job. And maybe you're ready to do that right now. I wouldn't doubt that you are. So forget about classes requiring having an STM. I'd like to encourage you to think of it as an opportunity to move to a better place than you've ever been before. A crisis can move you to a better place than you would ever be apart from that crisis. I've told you some of my story. Going through what I did 36 years ago, was helpful to me. I wouldn't want to go through it again. But if you make the most of a crisis, you can make progress that you never otherwise would have made. Now I'm going to email all the members, Tyler can help me with this, with an old banner article that explains what STM work is in general terms. And it's not just about Article 17s and recovering from that. It's about looking at the past and assessing where we are in the present, where we hope to go in the future. It's transitional ministry. Transition is from here to there. Well, what's here? Takes a while to figure that out sometimes, but here we are. Where are we going? Well, the promised land, right? Like Israel in the book of Exodus. They're in the desert. They're going to the promised land. They don't know what the promised land is exactly. They know it's good. But in the meantime, they're in the desert. And in the desert, things aren't so clear. That's transitional ministry. And my job as an STM is to help the church progress down that road of transition. And it can lead a church to a much better place. For example, knowing Jesus and making him known. Knowing Jesus, you have a discipleship team. Making him known, you have an outreach team. What does it look like for this congregation to know Jesus better? What's the discipleship program, if you want to call it that, look like? What does the outreach program look like? What does it look like for this church to make Jesus known? Now that's changing all the time. We can always be better at it. That's transitional ministry.
I'm open it up to any questions that anybody has for Pastor Dan.
Well, I talked with Tyler. Our plan is, if you don't ask me any questions, I'll talk more. And I'm a preacher. I can talk, right? So I'll talk some more. How I go about STM work, there's two rules that are very, very important to me. Keep the council in the driver's seat and keep the congregation in the loop. That's how you make progress. And if you don't do those things, regardless of your circumstances, it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. Council needs to be in charge, have a good relationship with the pastor, and that communication loop needs to always be fluid and effective. Pastor, council, congregation. That's what it takes for any church. Now, any questions?
You might be home for lunch.
Yeah. Following the leading of the Spirit. Oh.
Would you anticipate we're in the live stream world. You're going to be famous.
No, thank you. Would you anticipate being involved, like with midweek Bible studies and stuff like that, if
Yes.
you come here?
Any way that I can connect with the congregation is an opportunity. And the more I connect, the more effective I'll be. And I love to connect with people. I'm a little nervous at first around new people. Maybe you're a little nervous around a new pastor, but I like to connect with people. That it doesn't work any other way. By the way, Mary the elder, she asked me, I met her in the parking lot, would I go to the discipleship team meetings? Oh, yeah. And yeah, to me, that's a no-brainer. And the outreach team, too.
I'm also going to put out a shameless plug in regards to that outreach team. You're literally looking at the two people on that outreach committee. We are looking at you to join us.
You're good. You're mic'd.
Oh, yeah, that's right. She helps me out when I get confused.
I didn't see your hand. I apologize. Coming. I wore my running heels.
Will this transitional time include some kind of surveys or looking at the congregation's feelings about what's happened as well?
The answer to that is yes. Matter of fact, part of preparing to have another pastor is filling out this profile, the church profile. That's the first step. And part of filling out the church profile is telling the congregation's story. And a congregation needs to be able to tell its story. And the way I like to do that is to hear the story from as many individual people as I can as they tell it to me, and kind of summarize it. I mean, the story's always different as you hear it from different people, but summarize it, write it down, give it to the council. Hey, is this the story as you see it too? Give it to the congregation to say, yeah, that's our story. Well, no, that's not our story. And we all come to know our story better. We can communicate it to the next pastor or prospective pastors as we interview them. So, yeah, in one way or another, we want to give people a chance to speak what's on their mind and what's on their heart, not only to the leaders of the church, but to one another. And I'm sure that since you've been through some of the difficulties of the past couple of years, part of how you get through that is you talk about it with one another. You work your feelings through. You understand that not everybody feels the same way, but discussing it digests it and helps you to grow from it. So yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering where you'll be driving from.
Oh, yeah. I live in Dutton. I don't know if you know where Dutton is. Anyway, yeah, my wife and I bought a home about 3 years ago in Dutton, and we really enjoy that. I'm a preacher's kid. Then I became a preacher, and I always lived in parsonages, so all I ever knew was call the building committee. But since we bought our own house and it needed remodeling, or we thought it did, Mary wanted it. But anyway, we do that ourselves and don't know what we're doing, but we watch YouTube. And sometimes we do it and then we do it again, but it's slow. But, you know, we own a house in Dutton, and that's an hour and 15 minutes. And so I'm a tethered STM. Untethered STMs will move anywhere and haul all their stuff with them. We're done with that. We have a home, we're staying in that home, but I'll have to commute, and we'll have to figure out how that works. You've gone dry again. I'm done. So
Yeah, and just to build off that question to Pastor Dan's point, that's something that the council and the search committee, we're going to end up having, if we move forward with this, there's going to have to be a contract that will be written up, and those type of, amongst other things. But his travel plans and how we may be able to accommodate him if he were to stay overnight, those are certainly things that we'll continue to discuss. So, just to elaborate on that answer. And are there any other questions for him before we excuse Pastor Dan? All right. With that, thanks for being here.
Now or forever hold your peace.
Pastor Dan, is some of this your